I've been making music since the kind of mid-90s. Started making music with computers when I was at sixth form, really. Learned the piano at the age of 8. So I kind of have that classical training background. But around the age of 16, started getting into making music with the computers, playing in bands and things like that. And to start with, it was just an Atari, Yamaha MIDI, kind of general MIDI synth, little unit, and just started learning how to sequence, really, MIDI sequencing with really basic preset general MIDI sounds. But then went to university, studied music but specialised in electroacoustics, and really started to kind of get into the recording, processing, synthesis, and around the same kind of time I bought my Juno 6, which was my first kind of proper synthesizer from a pawnbrokers in Washington, DC. Around that kind of same time, I got into drum and bass. I was at university at the same time as a guy called John B, who's a producer who was signed to Formation at the time, but was releasing stuff on Prototype, Groove Riders label, later Metalheads, and a lot of significant labels. We started kind of DJing, putting on a night together in Durham, and I started on the radio as well. I'd been collecting music for a long time, so kind of DJing was an obvious progression. But it kind of went hand in hand with producing. So I wouldn't really say that I was a producer first and a DJ second. I guess if anything, I was a musician before I was a producer and a DJ. I was collecting soul, funk, kind of rare groove, jazz. That was really my kind of my passion as a DJ and as a kind of music collector. When I first heard drum and bass, it was the Music Box album by Ronnie Size, DJ Crust, DJ Die, all those kind of Bristol people. And it pulled so many influences and sounds from other music that I loved. Obviously they came out of that whole Wild Bunch, kind of Massive Attack, Portishead, Tricky scene that was going on in Bristol at the time, which I was into in a massive way as well. So I started off on the piano. I also learned the organ when I was kind of 11, and went through all the grades with that. Part of my love for the organ is that it's incredibly loud. It's the most full frequency instrument. It goes way, way below the deepest bass lines of any dub or drum and bass. It goes totally into kind of subsonic territory. The very smallest pipes go way up into the top of our kind of hearing range. And drum and bass is, for my money, the only genre that kind of fills that spectrum in the same way. I would argue that I'm probably the first person to draw a connection between pipe organs and drum and bass, and I appreciate that it's tenuous. So the scene today is in a really healthy place. There's a lot of people making a lot of music. It's really encouraging to see that there's always new blood coming through, people with new ideas, new influences, new kind of frames of reference. It's kind of strange having been not part of the first wave, because I mean the people who really built this genre started, you know, in the early 90s, and I really broke through, you know, after 2000. So to a lot of those people, I was a kind of young upstart, and it's a bit strange now, 20 years on, to be considered part of the old guard and dealing with young upstarts myself. So one of the lovely things that I get to do as an A&R is listen through to copious amounts of demos. Things we listen for. The first thing is it's nice if it's not EDM house. A lot of the stuff that we get sent these days is like 128 BPM kind of stadium EDM. And I have no idea why they send it to hospital, but you know, fair play for trying. So drum and bass or kind of associated genres is always a nice start. Beyond that, we're looking for ideas. We don't expect the music to be expertly mixed down or mastered. Generally speaking, badly mastered demos are much more unpleasant to listen to than completely unmastered demos. You can always hear the potential in a piece of music when it's left a bit more natural, I guess. If it's squashed to within an inch of its life, often the music kind of loses all of its integrity. But it's ideas, originality, a voice, those are the kind of the first things that we listen for, and then we often follow that up with, you know, asking for a bit more music, and at that point you're kind of looking for consistency. So you want to know that that one good tune that you heard isn't a kind of lucky mistake, that there's a little bit more behind this artist than just that one tune. But the most important element of all of it is an individual voice. If it sounds like a lot of other people that are out there, then it's not of a great deal of interest, because if you could go to producer X and get, you know, the real thing, why would you choose a kind of copycat version from someone else? So if I could travel back in time 20 years ago and give myself a tip back then, it would be, and it's something that I've said in, you know, quite a few of these kind of tutorials, is keep it simple. My natural instinct is to layer, tweak every detail so that it sounds amazing. But actually what matters is how everything sounds together. If you can make a tune that has 6 elements and sounds good, then that's a massive achievement, and it will always sound more direct and more kind of, well, it's just easier to connect with than something that has 50 elements. There's this idea out there that you have to layer and build and EQ and compress and sidechain so that everything sounds massive, with certain types of music at least. And my feeling is that simpler elements that sound natural, that combine together really well, that connects on a very different level to kind of maximized, over-engineered music. It's the same thing with like drum sounds. This idea that, you know, your snare has to be amazing, your kick has to be amazing. It has to sound amazing when the bass is playing, when your keys or your pads or your vocal are playing, that absolutely. But by itself, those elements can sound as awful as you want, as long as with everything else, they make sense. When you're putting in, you know, like a Rhodes or something, you know, some keys, that Rhodes could be really thin and could sound fantastic when it's layered over everything else. By itself, it might sound horrible, but you don't need every element to be amazing for the tune to sound really good.
Give it back to me.